A moment.
May I make a clarification
Certainly.
for the participants for the defense?
Yes.
Winston Thompson will be defense attorney 1, Juliet Jensen will be defense attorney 2, and I, William Chung, will be defense attorney 3.
Okay. Okay. Did the scorers have any questions following that clarification? I just want to make sure that that was taken care of before we begin.
I did not catch who defense counsel 1 is.
Okay, so counsel, whoever came on, if you could come back on and restate that, please.
That would be me, Winston Thompson, who would be performing the direct examination of Avery Becker.
Any other clarifications for our scorers? No. If not, then a mock trial is now in session. I will turn the courtroom over to Judge Christiansen and allow the proceedings to begin.
Good afternoon, Team Minecraft. Good afternoon, Team Pac-Man. We're pleased to have you here today. First question, prosecution, are you ready for trial?
Yes, Your Honor. We have a brief preliminary matter before we begin, though.
Okay, well, I'm doing is it a preliminary matter for the actual trial part? I'm just going through the instructions, including swearing in the parties.
It is a preliminary matter for the trial.
Oh, okay. We'll get to that one. Okay. Let me just go through a couple of these things here that are pre-trial procedures. I'm asking, and the defense, Pac-Man, are you ready for trial?
Yes, Your Honor.
Very good. Thank you. We've talked about the scoring panelists. We've got the trial rosters. I want to just make sure we have the instructions from last year, and I'm not 100% sure that they apply to this forum, but I will follow the instructions that I'm given. The next one, I need to just confirm that if video recorders are present, which we know this is being recorded and live streamed, please confirm that both teams have approved the taping of this round. Prosecution?
Yes, Your Honor, we confirm.
And defense?
Yes, Your Honor.
Thank you. I do have to inform you that the Colorado Bar Association may be taking photographs of the competition during the round, and that participation in this tournament grants automatic permission for the use of these photos of the Colorado Bar Association. Now let's just make sure that no one in this forum is not connected to teams in this round. Let me say that better. Is anyone in the gallery or anyone in this Zoom meeting not connected with the teams competing in this round? Okay, very good. I want to remind the teams that no recesses will be allowed, with the exception of those granted for a health emergency, and especially not between the end of the witness examination and the beginning of closing arguments. I need to talk to the scoring panelists. Do any of you have any reason to be biased in judging either team?
No, Your Honor.
Okay.
I don't, Your Honor.
Very good.
No, Your Honor.
Very good, thank you. Do want to remind the teams and coaches that any disputes arising out of this competition must be reported in accordance with the competition rules. I want to remind the teams that their compliance with time requirements will be considered in scoring individual performances. Want to confirm that no coach or team member, oh, we don't have a jury box. That would be one of those instructions that doesn't seem to apply to this forum. Okay, so do we have any individuals that would be considered in the galley that are not participating? Okay, very good. What we're going to do is I'm going to swear in everybody. So the first thing I'm going to ask is all the team members, please raise your right hands. Team members, do you promise that the presentation you're about to give will faithfully and truthfully conform to the facts and the rules of the mock trial competition?
I do.
Yes, Your Honor.
Yes, Your Honor.
Thank
Yes,
you.
Your Honor.
Okay. And let's see, witnesses. This seems redundant. Let me have the witnesses raise your right hand, please. Do you promise that the testimony you're about to give will faithfully and truthfully conform to your witness statements, and that you will not add material facts or opinions which are not contained in the case problem, and that you will follow the rules and procedures of the mock trial competition? Witnesses?
Yes, Your Honor.
Yes, Your Honor.
Yes, Your Honor.
Very good, thank you. Do we have any teachers and coaches witnessing? No, okay, very good. And scoring panelists, let me have you raise your right hands, please. Do you promise to adjudicate the mock trial competition as fairly and objectively as possible in accordance with the facts, procedures, and rules of the mock trial competition?
Yes.
I do.
I do.
Thank you. Okay, I think that concludes our pretrial information. So before we get to the actual trial, are there any preliminary matters? Prosecution.
Yes, Your Honor. The prosecution would like to request a motion to publish constructively. That would mean that we would assume that yourself and the members of the jury, as well as the other team members on the Pac-Man team, have already been provided with copies of the exhibit prior to the trial. And so in order to save time screen sharing, we would like to publish those exhibits. We would like to publish those exhibits through people just looking at the copies they already have provided.
Okay, any objection, defense?
No objection.
Okay. I guess my question of that would be, do the scoring panelists have copies of the exhibits that they can refer to?
Yes, Your Honor.
Yes, everyone's saying yes. Ms. Walsh?
Yes.
Yes, Your Honor.
All right, very good. Okay, so we'll grant the request. Any other preliminary
Thank you, Your
matters?
Honor.
Okay, Mr. Get your full name here, sir. Mr. Chung, do you have any preliminary matters for the defense?
Yes, Your Honor. We ask that any time spent playing videos as evidence not be used as part of our time.
Okay. Any objection, prosecution?
No objection, Your Honor.
Okay, then we will allow that. So any videos being played will not be used against, not be considered as time spent for that team. Okay. Any other preliminary matters, Mr. Chung?
Yes, we also ask that co-counsel can briefly share screen for the stipulated facts.
Excuse me, would you like me to share my screen?
Sorry, my co-counsel.
Oh,
Okay.
yes, apologies.
Okay. And who is that, Mr. Chung? Oh, there we go. Very good. Thank you, Mr. Thompson. Okay. And Mr. Chung, you wanted to just show these stipulated facts?
Yes, to yourself and the jury.
Very good. Okay. Very good. I think that's enough time. Thank you very much, Mr. Chung. Anything further?
No, Your Honor.
All right, very good. Well, the prosecution, you may begin with your opening statement.
Your Honor, members of the jury, the defendant, Avery Becker, wanted to get back at Mackenzie Brackman if it was the last thing that they did. We are gathered here today because Mackenzie Brackman was murdered on March 6 of 2020. On that day, Mr. Brackman's Ring doorbell system recorded a masked intruder entering the back of his home, and the following morning he was found stabbed in the back with a large kitchen knife. Mr. Brackman was a local criminal defense lawyer, but was also the head coach of the Colorado High School mock trial team. Just days before Mr. Brackman's murder, the defendant, who was a senior on the CHS mock trial team, was angry with Mr. Brackman, for they had been kicked off the team after vandalizing Mr. Brackman's car. The defendant was so angry after the incident, angry enough to say, "I would get back at him if it was the last thing that I did. If he's so upset about his car, just wait until he sees what I do to his house. I'm going to wait until he's at work, break in, and trash it." Now, anyone can tell you that Mr. Brackman and the defendant had a rough relationship, but it went beyond the typical feud. Now, the defense wants a riveting explanation for what happened, not the simple answer of what did. See, the facts in this case are straightforward, ladies and gentlemen, despite what the defense may tell you. Today, the prosecution will call 3 witnesses to the stand: Alex Cifuentes, Kyle Kuzak, and Detective Jordan Markowitz, who will attest to the facts in this case today. First, we intend to call Alex Cifuentes, a fellow mock trial student, who will testify to the repetitive history of aggression the defendant exhibited. Mr. Cifuentes will talk about his firsthand observations of the unusual feud the defendant had with Mr. Brackman and confirm that the defendant sent him messages saying, "If Mr. Brackman is still upset about his car, just wait until he sees what I do to his house. I'm going to wait until he's at work, break in, and trash it." The defendant sent these messages to Mr. Cifuentes just days before Mr. Brackman's murder. You will next hear from Kyle Kuzak, a Colorado Bureau of Investigation certified crime scene reconstruction investigator, who will confirm that Mr. Brackman's death was a result of a burglary gone wrong when Mr. Brackman confronted an intruder breaking into his home. Mr. Kuzak will explain how he reached this conclusion using detailed reconstruction analysis. You will last hear from Detective Jordan Markowitz, the homicide detective who investigated Mr. Brackman's death. Detective Markowitz will explain how she followed the evidence to the best conclusion and that Mr. Brackman's death was a result of a burglary gone wrong. Detective Markowitz will explain how her investigation went in the unlikely direction towards the CHS mock trial team and the defendant, where upon further investigation, she obtained text messages between the defendant and Mr. Cifuentes, where the defendant clearly outlined a plan to break into Mr. Brackman's home while he was at work. Detective Markowitz also obtained cell tower data from the defendant's phone. This data reveals that the defendant's phone traveled from their home to Mr. Brackman's home, taking the most logical route, placing the defendant's phone in the vicinity of Mr. Brackman's home at the time of his murder. In this case, the prosecution must prove beyond a reasonable doubt that the defendant, while committing secondary burglary, committed a felony murder in the first degree. Under Colorado law, secondary burglary is when a person either knowingly breaks into or unlawfully enters a dwelling with the intent to commit criminal mischief against another person or property. Felony murder is when, in the course of committing secondary burglary, an individual attempts to commit or commits the death of another person. In this case, the evidence will prove beyond a reasonable doubt that the defendant, while committing secondary burglary, committed a felony murder in the first degree. Though the defense may present an alternative theory, we ask you to remember to follow the evidence. The defense's case is backed by the assumption that the defendant's alibi is sound, despite the fact that the only person who can confirm it is the defendant's best friend, Taylor Perkins, who is someone who is willing to do anything for their best friend. The defendant claims that their threats were made in the heat of the moment and they would never act upon them. But the evidence and testimony that will be heard today will prove that they did. See, the defendant was someone who had a history of aggression and an unusual feud with Mr. Brackman. They were angry for being kicked off the team, and the facts will show that they acted upon this anger once again, for they would get back at Mr. Brackman if it was the last thing that they did. Members of the jury, we implore you to follow the evidence to the best straightforward conclusion. We urge you to return a verdict of guilty. Thank you.
Thank you. Defense? Opening?
Thank you, Your Honor.
Thank you.
The facts do not just add up. On March 6, 2020, Mackenzie Brackman was found dead in the doorway of his own home. Mr. Brackman was the head coach of the Colorado High School mock trial team. He was a well-known and well-respected lawyer. After investigating this murder case, the police concluded it was Avery Becker, a member of his mock trial team. While Becker and Coach Brackman did not have the most stable of relationships, Avery Becker could not have killed her coach. Becker had natural talent for mock trial, yes. She could practice unprepared and present flawlessly. Avery Becker did not appreciate her natural mock trial abilities and constantly told her to be more prepared. As a result of this, Brackman demoted her down to a B team. Fortunately, Taylor Perkins, Avery Becker's best friend and also a member of that mock trial team, was able to convince Coach Brackman to allow Avery Becker back on the team. Then, the team went to the regional competition where Avery Becker won multiple awards. Mr. Brackman was still upset that she never prepared for anything. He told Avery Becker that she did not deserve any of the awards that she had won. Naturally, Avery Becker did not respond well to this. She grabbed what she thought was a dry erase marker and wrote on her coach's car. Avery Becker apologized many times for this, but Mr. Brackman could not accept her apology. The facts simply don't add up. The night before the murder, Miss Avery Becker and Taylor Perkins were at the Fry Shack with a couple of teammates. They were using Avery Becker's phone to play games on, and Avery Becker lost that phone. Among the group of mock trial students that were at that restaurant was Alex Cifuentes. Alex Cifuentes was and still is very jealous of Miss Avery Becker's natural mock trial abilities. The next day, the day of the murder, Miss Avery Becker and her best friend skipped school and went looking for the phone that she had lost at the Fry Shack. While the two best friends were looking for that phone, Mr. Brackman was killed. The police investigation began with Detective Jordan Markowitz, who lost evidence, neglected to investigate other suspects, and based his entire theory around the location of a phone that could have been in anybody's possession. Next, Kyle Kuzak. Now, Kyle Kuzak went to the scene and attempted to reconstruct this scene using evidence gathered from the police. During this investigation, he took the easy way out. He made a lot of assumptions and failed to analyze all of the possible evidence. Now, Kyle Kuzak compiled his findings into a report that was reviewed by Blake Van Owen. Today, you're going to hear from Miss Avery Becker, who will establish the relationships involved in this case, including that between her and Mr. Brackman. Miss Becker will also provide clarity on her whereabouts the day before as well as the day of the murder. Then you will hear from Miss Taylor Perkins, who will also tell you about the relationships on the mock trial team. She will finally talk about Alex Cifuentes. Professor Blake Van Owen will explain the facts of the case that simply just don't add up, and he will show that the police took the easy way out in this investigation. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, the facts just don't add up. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, prosecution, you may call your first witness.
Thank you, Your Honor. The prosecution would like to call Alex Cifuentes to the stand.
Okay. Since I apologize, I do have a question. Since I've already sworn everybody in, do I need to do it again? Okay, very good. You may begin. You may inquire.
Mr. Cifuentes, good afternoon. Can you please state your name and spell the last for the record?
But of course, my name is Alex Cifuentes, and that is S-to-the-I-F-U-E-N-T-E-S.
Now, Mr. Cifuentes, how old are you?
I am currently 18 and am a senior at Colorado High School.
How did you know the late Mackenzie Brackman?
Mr. Brackman was our fantastic Colorado High School mock trial coach.
And how did you know Miss Becker?
Avery Becker was a fellow teammate of mine on the mock trial team at the high school.
During your time on mock trial, were you and Miss Becker ever rivals?
Of course not. Avery and I have always been really good friends, especially within the team. We're equally skilled team members, and we really push each other to be better on the team.
Did you and Miss Becker spend a lot of time together?
Of course we did. You know, mock trial being such a time-committing activity, we spent a lot of time from practice to competition.
In your perception, did Miss Becker and Mr. Brackman get along?
Absolutely not. Avery was constantly to practice, had no respect for Brackman at all, despite his best wishes for her. Mr. Brackman eventually confronted Avery about her complete lack of attitude towards the team, and Avery would get quite infuriated at times, and especially when Mr. Brackman would point it out to her.
Thank you. Was Miss Becker ever demoted from the A team?
She was. Somehow she got Taylor Perkins to quit, forcing Mr. Brackman to bring Avery back, and she quit, and it forced Avery to return back to the A team.
After this, was there any other major dispute between Mr. Brackman and Miss Becker?
There was practice after regionals or so. Mr. Brackman had told Avery that while she had won the awards of like best attorney and closing arguments and such at the regional competition, any good lawyer would prepare for work and just present their best effort in court. Mr. Brackman's comments really infuriated Avery, and she stormed out of practice.
What happened after their dispute?
Well, as Avery was storming out the door, she did the unthinkable and vandalized Mr. Brackman's prized vintage Porsche by writing "Worst Attorney Award" right across the hood in permanent marker.
Did you witness Miss Becker taking the marker that she used to vandalize Mr. Brackman's car?
Of course I did. I was right there.
Had she been standing near the whiteboard?
No, the marker was not even on the dry erase board. It was on an easel of paper. I don't know why a dry erase marker would be on an easel of paper to write with. It was obviously a permanent marker.
Was Miss Becker permanently removed from the team after the incident?
She was. Mr. Brackman, however, was caring enough not to press charges against Avery.
After the vandalization of Mr. Brackman's car, did Miss Becker ever ask you to try and convince Mr. Brackman to let her back on the team?
Avery did. She had sent me a text, well, many texts, but she asked me to talk to Mr. Brackman and especially on her behalf to try and convince him to let her back on the team since it meant so much to her.
Did you do this?
I did. I knew that the team was better off without Avery. I still went to Mr. Brackman and gave an impassioned plea for Avery since I knew she was going through a pretty tumultuous time in her life. And yeah.
Did this work?
No, Mr. Brackman was not really interested in bringing back Avery. It's just everything leading up to the point of the vandalization and Avery's just general attitude towards mock trial leading up to that point. And Mr. Brackman wasn't really interested in bringing Avery back.
Moving on, now Mr. Cifuentes, a few weeks after Mr. Brackman was murdered, were you ever contacted by a police detective?
I was. I ended up telling the detective about the messages that I had received from Avery. She was planning to break into Mr. Brackman's house. I definitely didn't want to rat out Avery on something that was just a text message at the time. I didn't know how serious it would be, but she really persisted.
Were you also ever contacted by a private investigator?
I was. An investigator showed up to my house a couple weeks ago and tried to get something to use to impeach me during my testimony, since that's kind of the job of the defense. Obviously, I didn't want to talk to her because her accusations were quite extended.
Had Miss Becker accused you of anything?
She did. She accused me of stealing her phone. I saw her the night of the Fry Shack. She was apparently giving it to some kid named Blair Rollins. She also accused me of faking the text that I'd sent to her. I don't even know how one would do that.
Did you know Blair Rawlings?
We went to the same school along with everyone else on the team. I know of Blair Rollins. I don't really know him personally.
And would you have ever stolen Miss Becker's phone?
Of course not. I definitely would have taken anyone's phone, certainly not Avery's, and especially not for some kid named Blair Rollins. I would never have done anything even further to put Mr. Brackman in danger.
What did you and Miss Becker discuss on the night of March 5th when you saw her at the Fry Shack?
We actually had a really good talk about how Avery should move on from mock trial and kind of forget of what she had done. She even thanked me for trying to help her to get back on the team.
Coming back to when you were contacted by the police, were you ever requested to conduct a police interview?
I was.
And did you bring your phone that had the text messages from Miss Becker?
No, unfortunately, when I was leaving the house in such a rush, I had forgotten that my phone was charging. It's really old. I had to be pretty much constantly plugged in to be usable. And since it had those pictures, I had to make sure it was on a full charge. But when my dad yelled at me to leave the house, I completely forgot that it was charging on my nightstand.
Did you offer to bring the phone after the interview?
I did, and the detective told us that it was completely fine for me to send him screenshots of the text instead. There was no complication with that.
Your Honor, let the record show that I'm directing opposing counsel to a copy that has been previously provided and marked as Exhibit 14, permission to direct the witness.
Okay. Any objection?
No objection, Your Honor.
Permission granted.
Mr. Cifuentes, can you direct your attention to what has been previously marked and provided as Exhibit 14? And can you please identify it?
Yes, these are the exact text messages between Avery and myself.
Have you ever received text messages from Avery before?
Of course we have. And in the 4 years, we've talked quite a bit, especially over text. Yeah.
Are these the text messages where Miss Becker asked you to try and convince Mr. Brackman to let them back on the team?
These are.
Are they also the messages where Miss Becker mentioned a plan to break into Mr. Brackman's home while he was at work?
Yes, it includes the messages that Avery had sent to me about her plan to break into Brackman's house.
And these messages came directly from your phone?
Of course they did.
Were these text messages altered in any shape or form?
Of course not. They're exactly the messages that Avery had sent to me.
And did you receive these text messages on the day Avery was kicked off the team?
I did.
Is it a true and accurate representation of the text messages the defendant sent you?
They are.
Your Honor, at this moment, I'd like to move Exhibit 14 into evidence.
Any objection to the admissibility of Exhibit 14?
No objection, Your Honor.
14 will be admitted.
Thank you, Your Honor. Assuming that the jurors have been provided Exhibit 14, Your Honor, can I have the permission to constructively publish Exhibit 14 to the jury and give them a second to view on?
I believe, yes, permission granted, as it was addressed in the pretrial issue conversations.
Okay, thank you. I will continue.
Thank you.
Mr. Cifuentes, what was the specific text message you received from Ms. Becker after they were moved from the team permanently?
I had received a text from Avery saying if Brackman thinks he was going to upset about what happened to his car, wait till he sees what I do to his house.
Thank you, Your Honor. No further questions.
Thank you. Cross-examination?
Yes, Your Honor. You were in mock trial?
Of course I was. All 4 years, man. It was such a great time. You know, we went to competition. It was a pretty good time. Yeah, it was a mock trial.
Mr. Brackman's mock trial.
Yeah, he was our amazing coach, you know, for all 4 years. We got to know him pretty well. Of course, not until this last year, unfortunately, you know, what we're here for today.
And Mr. Becker was also on that mock trial team.
Avery was a team member of mine, yes.
And Mr. Becker was a natural at mock trial team.
Avery was really good at coming up with things on the spot. Yeah, you could say natural, I guess. That can mean a lot of things.
And this annoyed you?
I mean, not really. We were pretty equally skilled team members. We were definitely not in contradiction of anything on the team. We worked together a lot.
But you thought he won awards on good looks alone?
Yeah,
This question asks for irrelevant character evidence. It is not offered. It's being offered to prove that the witness acted in accordance to their personal belief, which is not admissible.
So is your objection based on improper character evidence or relevant?
Correct. Improper character evidence.
Okay, response?
Your Honor, this goes to show the relationship between Mr. Cifuentes and Mr. Becker.
Okay, any reply?
Under Rule 404, the reputation or opinion of a character is admissible if it is proving it is when it's essential to a claim about how a witness is acting in the future. In this question, it is not a relevant opinion of how Mr. Cifuentes will act with Alex or Avery Becker.
Okay. Mr. Winston, any final?
No, Your Honor.
Okay, I'm going to overrule the objection. You did correctly state the Rule 404 character evidence, but it wasn't being offered to prove conduct or that conduct would be in conformity. It was offered to prove the relationship and perhaps the animosity between the parties. So overruled.
Thank you, Your Honor. I'm going to ask that last question again. You thought he won awards on good looks alone?
I mean, sure, Avery definitely had a lot of talent in mock trial. Whether that was actually producing something meaningful in court, you could say it up to yourself.
And not because of any real talent.
I wouldn't say so. I mean, Avery definitely had talent to come up with things on the spot. She really had, you know, she appealed to most of the judges, but yeah.
Okay, thank you. You were at the Fry Shack the night before the murder?
Of course, yeah. I go to the Fry Shack all the time as mockers. You know, yeah, we hang out a lot. Me and Avery were there, and we had a pretty good discussion. You know, as I said earlier, we had
Yes,
quite a meaningful evening.
Thank you. And you did talk to Mr. Becker at that Fry Shack?
To Avery, yes, I did talk to Avery. We were there together. I talked to Avery.
And you used Miss Becker's phone at that Fry Shack?
We were using it together, really. Avery was showing me some games that she got.
Yes, thank you. And this was after
So
Ms. Becker allegedly sent you a series of texts?
Avery had sent me those texts. I assume it'd be the same phone. I don't know why Avery had two of them.
You spoke to a detective regarding the murder of Mr. Brackman?
I did.
And you provided them screenshots of those texts?
Yeah, the detective said it's totally fine for me to send over the screenshots, and it wasn't a problem at all.
And they were screenshots of the text messages?
They were exact copies of the text messages that Avery had sent me.
And the screenshots were from your phone?
They were exactly from my phone. I don't have another phone. I have a new one. The old one is
You
gone.
showed them from your phone because you had left your phone at home?
Yes, unfortunately, no, I had forgotten it because it was old and had to be charging. I couldn't just teleport it to the station, so I sent over the text messages that the detective had asked me for.
And you have since disposed of that phone?
Of course, it's pretty much a brick at that point. It really just was completely unusable. So yeah, I got a new phone. I don't know where it is. The old one is now.
Thank you.
It doesn't really matter.
Your Honor. I apologize. No further questions, Your Honor.
Thank you. Any redirect?
Yes,
if
Your
there's
Honor.
time? Thank you.
Mr. Cifuentes, in your opinion, were you ever rivals with Avery?
Of course not. We were really good teammates. We knew each other pretty well, and although we had our differences, we got along pretty well.
And on the night of March 5th, when you saw her at the Fry Shack, would you have ever stolen her phone?
Of course not. Avery was sitting right next to me. I don't know how I could have stolen it. Especially, I wouldn't steal anyone's phone. No, I didn't steal anything.
Would you have ever wanted to put Mr. Brackman in any harm?
Who would? Mr. Brackman was fantastic. I can't believe what happened to him. It's so unfortunate. Hopefully we get this sorted out today.
Thank you, Your Honor. No further questions.
Okay. Any recross?
No, Your Honor.
Thank you very much. Prosecution, you may call your next witness.
Your Honor, the prosecution would like to call Kyle Kuzak to the stand.
Mr. Kuzak? Very good. You may inquire.
Thank you, Your Honor. Mr. Kuzak, can you please state your name and spell it for the record?
Yes, I can. My name is Kyle Kuzak, last name being spelled K-U-Z-A-K.
Excellent, Mr. Kuzak. What is your current job?
I currently work with the Denver Police Department as a crime scene reconstruction investigator, which is also just known as a CSR.
And do you have any certifications for your work?
As a matter of fact, I do. I am certified to work as a CSR under the Colorado Bureau of Investigation.
What types of cases have you previously investigated?
Well, I've worked on numerous cases, some of which would be including home invasions, burglaries and other property crimes, homicides, domestic violence, fatal accidents, and even armed robberies, to name a few.
That's quite the list. How long have you been in this field?
I've been working as a CSR for 19 years.
Your Honor, considering Mr. Kuzak's state certification and lengthy experience in a variety of different cases, I would like to certify him as an expert in crime scene reconstruction.
Any objection?
No objection, Your Honor.
Okay. This witness will be certified as an expert in crime scene, what was the word you used?
Reconstruction.
Reconstruction. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Your Honor. Mr. Kuzak, how do you initially approach the process of investigating a crime scene?
When initially approaching a crime scene, I follow two of my key principles. My first principle is I assume every case will be going to trial. This allows me to conduct a thorough and comprehensive investigation. Secondly, starting from day one, whenever I'm evaluating evidence, I do so with a mindset for future reconstruction.
Excellent. And Mr. Kuzak, what methods do you generally use to create your reports?
I follow a 5-step process to help ensure efficiency and accuracy in my investigations.
And did you apply these methods to this case?
Yes, of course.
How did your involvement with this case begin?
Well, my involvement in this case began when I personally visited the crime scene. It is within my opinion that visiting a crime scene provides insights and enhances your perspective on the case. Thereafter, I would analyze all evidence, all police reports in this case, the photographs from the crime scene, as well as the 4-ring security camera videos.
When you visited the crime scene, what pieces of physical evidence stood out to you?
Well, fortunately, there was a lot of physical evidence that stood out to me. Beginning near the backsliding glass door of the kitchen, there were marks on the floor, or scuff marks, if you would. There was a broken plate on the ground, an open knife drawer, and a knife block with one knife missing, as well as blood spatters leading to the body.
Thank you, Mr. Kuzak. I'm going to ask you a bit about each of these pieces of evidence and how they contributed to your report. Your Honor, let the record show that I'm directing the defense counsel to what has previously been marked as Exhibit 18. Permission to direct the witness.
Any objection?
No objection, Your Honor.
Permission granted.
Thank you, Your Honor. Mr. Kuzak, do you have this image in front of you?
Yes, I do.
Excellent. Do you recognize this photograph?
As a matter of fact, I do. These are the scuff marks that I analyzed at the crime scene.
And is this one of the same photographs you utilized to create your report?
It indeed is.
Would you say that it's a fair and accurate representation of the crime scene you saw?
Yes.
Your Honor, I ask that this exhibit now be moved into evidence.
Any objection to the admissibility of Exhibit 18?
No objection, Your Honor.
18 will be admitted.
Thank you, Your Honor. Mr. Kuzak, what is this photograph?
Well, this photograph is of, once again, the scuff marks that were found near the back sliding glass door of the kitchen.
Thank you. And what did you conclude from this photograph?
Well, after analyzing this evidence and comparing it to other evidence, it became clear to me that the scuffle between the perpetrator and the victim likely began at the backside of the home.
What did you conclude from the broken plate you mentioned?
Well, from the broken plate, which is it's in between the scuff marks and the kitchen, it was clear to me that the struggle was both intense and sustained while moving to the kitchen.
All right. What did you conclude about the open drawer and the missing knife?
Well, after hearing someone trying to enter the victim's home, the victim likely tried to arm themselves. They likely opened the knife drawer trying to look for a knife, but opted to instead use the larger chef's knife from the knife block.
Mr. Kuzak, what was the ultimate outcome of this altercation?
Well, the ultimate outcome was when the victim was likely notified to the perpetrator trying to enter their home, whether it be from Ring security camera notifications or from just them actually entering their home. There would be a scuffle sustained between the two moving to the kitchen where, unfortunately, the victim would be stabbed by the perpetrator. Finally, the perpetrator would crawl to the front door and forcibly remove the knife.
Based on your expert opinion, what type of crime occurred at this scene?
Well, while this crime may not have initially been intended for a felony murder, throughout the perpetrator's events, it would ended in a felony murder.
Thank you, Mr. Kuzak. And was your work peer reviewed after you came to this conclusion?
Yes, it was, to make sure it is both logical and sound of mind.
And are you aware of the theory that Professor Van Owens deduced from the same crime scene?
As a matter of fact, I am, though personally, I don't agree with this theory. There are a lot of discrepancies between ours. It fails to explain the majority of the physical evidence, such as the scuff marks or the broken plate, and even why the victim would have opened the knife drawer or taken out the knife in the first place. And most importantly, his report, he states that he didn't even visit the crime scene. He's just taking different pieces of information from my investigation, almost slandering them in a way.
Thank you, Your Honor, and thank you, Mr. Kuzak. I have no further questions.
Thank you. Cross-examination.
Yes, Your Honor. You attempted to reconstruct the crime scene for this case.
Well, I wouldn't say that I attempted. I would say I successfully did so.
An attempt can include a success or a failure.
True, but I was eventually successful.
Thus, you attempted to reconstruct the crime scene for this case.
Oh, of course, yes.
And for this reconstruction, you attempted to recreate the events.
Well, once again, I was successful, but I attempted to reconstruct the events leading throughout the investigation.
And in this attempt, you had to use evidence collected by other people.
Well, I may have used evidence. I was personally there at the crime scene and evaluated the evidence for myself as well.
But you have to use the evidence collected by other people.
I don't necessarily have to. It was of my expert opinion to do so.
And you do not collect the evidence yourself.
Well, for the majority of the photographs, that would be true. But as I've already stated, I personally investigated the different pieces of physical evidence.
You went to the crime scene only after it was processed.
Well, sure, but that's just normal practice for me.
And you did not see the police's collection of evidence.
Well, I was actually able to link the different evidence ID numbers from the scene to different police reports that were related to it.
But you did not see the police as they collected the evidence.
No, I was not able to.
And you were not able to recreate all of the events.
Well, that may be true. I'm always wishing I had more physical evidence, but I honestly believe that I had enough physical evidence to recreate the crime scene.
But you were not able to recreate all of the events.
Well, while some things may be in question, the final outcome is still assured.
And you were not able to place all of the evidence.
Unfortunately, I'm able to.
Moving on, for your reconstruction, you used photographs of blood droplets.
Yes, I did.
And cast off.
Yes, cast off marks from the blood spatter.
But these pictures were lost.
Unfortunately, I was alerted to after my investigation was already completed that different files of the photographs have been corrupted, but this was not of consequence to me.
So nobody can view these pictures anymore.
No, they are not able to now.
And we only have testimony that these pictures even existed.
Well, it's true that there's only my testimony that those pictures existed. There are still other pictures that display the majority of what I've stated in my testimony.
But we only have testimony that the pictures of blood droplets existed.
Well, of course, but once again, this is not of consequence to me. I'd already completed my investigation, and other members of the crime lab had also seen these pictures.
Thank you. Moving on. As a part of your reconstruction, you used scuff marks.
Yes, I did.
Found near the back door.
Yes.
And you concluded that these scuff marks are signs of a struggle.
Well, I believed it was indicative of a struggle because as the perpetrator was entering the home, the scuffle got intense. So it was likely marks caused by people's shoes as they were entering.
But nobody analyzed these scuff marks.
No one professionally analyzed the composition of the scuff marks.
Nobody analyzed the rubber from Mr. Brackman's shoes.
No.
And nobody analyzed the rubber from Avery Becker's shoes.
No, they did not.
We do not know whose shoes made those scuff marks.
Well, while we may not know whose shoes did it, it is also known that the perpetrator had the general height and build of the defendant. So let that speak for itself.
And you used these scuff marks for your conclusion.
Yes, I did.
Thank you, Your Honor. No further questions.
Thank you. Redirect?
Yes, Your Honor, briefly. Mr. Kuzak, did you have access to the now corrupted photographs of the blood spatters while you were creating your report?
As a matter of fact, I did. I actually had access to these files throughout the whole duration of my report, not just in different segments. I was able to refer them throughout the whole process.
Thank you, Your Honor. I have no further questions.
Thank you. Any recross based on that one question?
No, Your Honor.
All right, thank you very much. Prosecution, you may call your next witness.
The prosecution would like to call Jordan Markowitz to the stand.
Okay. Jordan Markowitz.
Good afternoon, Ms. Markowitz. Can you please state your name and spell your last for the record?
Yes, Jordan Markowitz, Markowitz.
And Detective Markowitz, what is your profession?
I'm a homicide detective with the Denver Police Department.
How long have you been with the DPD?
I've been with the DPD for 13 years.
And how long have you worked as a detective at the department?
For 7.
Have you received any special training to assist you in your work as a homicide detective?
Yes, I completed a certification by the American Academy of Law Enforcement in cell phone data technology and forensic.
And what did you learn through that training?
Yes, through this training, I learned how to interpret cell phone data, how to download it, and how to use different technologies with it. I also learned how to obtain and interpret cell phone tower data.
Do you frequently use this special training in your work as a homicide detective?
Yes, I've downloaded information from over 100 phones, and I've used cell phone tower data in 50.
I'd like to request that we qualify Detective Jordan Markowitz as an expert in the areas of forensic investigation and cell phone forensics, under the Rule 702 based on her abundant experience, skill, and knowledge in those fields. 702 states that a witness may be qualified as an expert if they have knowledge, skill, experience, education, or training that helps them testify to opinions. Detective Markowitz clearly has extensive experience in forensic investigation, as well as both training and experience in cell phone forensic investigation.
Any objection to this witness being qualified as an expert in forensic investigation and cell phone forensics? Is that correct?
Yes, Your Honor.
Okay, yes. Any objection?
No objection, Your Honor.
Okay, this witness will be qualified as an expert in forensic investigation and cell phone forensics.
Thank you very much, Your Honor. Detective Markowitz, would you describe for the jury how you became involved in this case?
Yes, I responded to the scene of Mackenzie Brackman's murder at 14:20 hours on March 6th after paramedics were notified.
And when you arrived at the scene, did you immediately observe Mr. Brackman's wound in the crime scene?
Yes, I did.
Were you able to recover any security footage from Mr. Brackman's home?
Yes, he had a Ring doorbell, which allowed me to download videos of his doorway. From this, I was able to obtain a video of a figure entering the house in a hoodie, Halloween mask, and gloves.
Thank you, Detective. And after your investigation at the scene, did you further investigate Brackman's cell phone?
Yes, I did. I was able to download a large amount of his texts and emails.
And did you observe any significant patterns in those texts and emails?
There was quite a lot about something called mock trial. It appeared he was a coach for a team.
And did you further investigate Brackman's mock trial affiliation?
Yes, I contacted the Colorado High School where the team was located and was able to contact a student there.
And which student on the team did you contact first?
Alex Cifuentes.
And did you interview Alex Cifuentes?
Yes, in the phone call before our interview, he was able to tell me that he had received several text messages from Avery Becker discussing how he wanted to trash Brackman's home.
And what did you learn when you interviewed Cifuentes at the police station?
Avery Becker had sent him several text messages after being kicked off the mock trial team. And while he did not have his phone at this interview, I was able to later obtain screenshots.
And after you investigated the Cifuentes lead, did you attempt to contact Avery Becker?
Yes, I did, but I was informed by the lawyer that I would have to go through her. I could not contact Avery.
And despite the fact that you were unable to interview Avery Becker, did you obtain a search warrant for her cell phone?
I did, but I was actually informed that the phone was lost around May 5th.
Were you able to obtain any cell data at all from Avery Becker?
Yes, I was able to obtain what are called call detail records.
And Detective, would you briefly explain what a call detail record is for the jury?
Yeah, so it's basically a recording of the interaction between a phone and the cell tower nearby, what it's communicating with, basically. So it can tell whether or not the communication the phone received was a call or text message, whether or not it was answered, the duration. It also tells us which antenna it connected to on the cell tower, which can give a location or approximate location of the phone.
And under most normal circumstances, do cell phones connect to the nearest cell phone tower?
Yes.
Moving back to the specifics of this particular case, did you notice any important points while you were reviewing Avery Becker's CDR data?
Yes. Around the time of Brackman's murder, Avery received several calls from a student named Taylor Perkins.
And based on the duration of those interactions, were any of the phone calls answered?
No.
Your Honor, I'd like permission to direct opposing counsel and the witness to Exhibit 16.
Okay. Any objection? No. Go ahead. You may continue. I apologize.
Oh, thank you very much. Would you describe the contents of this exhibit for the jury, Detective Markowitz?
Yes, this is a diagram I created in the course of my investigation.
Excuse me.
Yes.
Is this exhibit a fair and accurate representation of the diagram that you created?
Yes.
And do professionals in your field regularly create diagrams to help them in the course of their duties?
Yes.
Your Honor, I'd like to ask you to admit Exhibit 16 into evidence, please.
Any objection to the admissibility of Exhibit 16?
No objection, Your Honor.
Exhibit 16 will be admitted.
Thank you. Ms. Markowitz, can you describe what this diagram signifies to the jury?
Yes, so this details the 3 cell towers Avery Becker's phone communicated with between 12:47 and 1:17. And using this, I can use a chronological order of these to approximate Becker's cell phone's location during these times.
And what does this diagram of possible locations demonstrate with regard to the crime, Detective Markowitz?
This demonstrates that it is incredibly probable that from 12:47, when Taylor Perkins placed their first call, to 1:17, when the last call was placed, Avery Becker drove the most direct route from their house to Mackenzie Brackman's house. And after 1:17, the phone stops communicating with cell towers entirely, which indicates that it could have been turned off, put in airplane mode, or destroyed.
Thank you, Detective Markowitz. No further questions, Your Honor.
Thank you. Cross-examination?
Yes, Your Honor. You were assigned to investigate Mackenzie Brackman's death.
That is correct, yes.
On March 6, 2020.
Yes.
And you noticed a Ring camera system.
Yes, it seemed that he had a Ring camera system set up.
Facing the back gate and the back door?
Yes.
I'd like to turn your attention to what has previously been marked as Exhibit 12 for identification purposes. Have you examined this video before?
Yes.
Can you tell the jury what happens in it?
Yes, in this, an intruder wearing a hoodie, Halloween mask, and gloves enters Mackenzie Brackman's back door.
Were you the custodian of this video after you had collected it from Mr. Brackman's house?
I was able to download it from his phone.
And is this a fair and accurate representation of the video you downloaded?
Yes.
Your Honor, permission to enter what has previously been marked as Exhibit 12 into evidence?
Any objection?
No objection, Your Honor.
Exhibit 12 will be admitted.
Detective Markowitz, in this video, the intruder shuts the door behind them, yes?
Yes.
And yet you previously stated that you found the back door open?
I did.
I'd like to move on. When you entered the house, you saw Mr. Brackman's body.
I did, yes.
In the front hallway?
Yes.
And you said that you observed blood spatter near the body?
Yes, I did find blood spatter.
Your team took photographs?
We did take photographs, yes.
You don't have the photographs.
Unfortunately, they were corrupted.
I'd like to move on. In the course of your investigation, you considered other possible case theories.
I mean, I always consider different leads, yes.
And there were possibilities for other suspects.
There were, but I found evidence that seemed to confirm this suspect.
You considered the assailant could have been a disgruntled former client of Mr. Brackman's.
Briefly, yes, but this lead did show more evidence.
And you never spoke with a former client of Mr. Brackman's?
No.
You never spoke with any witnesses involved in his cases?
No.
Partners?
No.
I'd like to move on. You obtained a warrant to search Avery Becker's phone.
Yes.
You were told Miss Becker reported her phone lost.
Yes, I was.
On March 5th, 2020.
Yes.
You were still able to get account records from cell towers?
Yes. I was able to do that through her cell phone number.
The phone was in the vicinity of Mr. Brackman's house.
That is what the data shows, yes.
On March 6th, 2020.
Yes.
You didn't look at the call or text records for March 4th?
No.
March 5th?
No. I did
March
find
7th?
March 6th. No.
No further questions, Your Honor.
Thank you. Any redirect?
Briefly, Your Honor. Detective Markowitz, in your line of work, is it common for professionals to come to conclusions during their investigation and investigate? Thank you, Detective Markowitz. No further questions.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, prosecution, any additional evidence or testimony?
No, Your Honor.
And so the prosecution rests?
Yes, Your Honor.
Very good. Defense, you may call your first witness.
The defense called Avery Becker to the stand.
Okay. Avery Becker, very good, thank you. You may proceed.
Thank you, Your Honor. Please state your full name and spell your last name for the record.
Avery Becker, Becker.
And why are you in court today?
I was wrongly accused of killing Mr. Brackman.
And can you tell the jury about your mock trial background?
Yeah. I was doing mock trial all 4 years at CHS.
And how did you know Mr. Brackman?
He was our mock trial coach.
What was your relationship like with Mr. Brackman?
He didn't like me. He claimed I didn't put in enough work, even though I was the best attorney on the team.
Did you get into an argument with Mr. Brackman after the regional competition?
Yeah, I did. He said I didn't deserve the awards I'd won.
Did anything happen as a result of that argument?
Well, yes. On the way out, I grabbed a marker from the pad that we wrote notes on. I thought it was dry erase, so I wrote on the hood of his prized Porsche Worst Attorney Award. Turned out it was permanent. I felt awful.
And did you apologize to Mr. Brackman for this?
Yes, I did. I tried loads of times to talk to him in person, but he wouldn't see me, so eventually I sent a text.
Did you have any friends on the mock trial team?
Yeah, I had friends. One of them was Taylor Perkins.
And what was your relationship like with Taylor Perkins?
We're best friends.
Was Taylor Perkins in the mock trial for the whole year last year?
No, she quit.
And why did she quit?
I got moved down to B team, and she quit so I could be moved back up. She was just being a good friend.
And did you hang out with Taylor Perkins on March 5th, the day before the murder?
Yes, I did.
When did you hear about Mr. Brackman's death?
We heard about it the next day, late afternoon.
And why did you not know of his death earlier?
I had lost my phone.
And when was the last time you remember having your phone?
The night before March 5th, Taylor and I were at Fry Shack.
And you spent all day March 6th looking for it?
Yeah, we skipped school and went back to Fry Shack. We also checked the mall. We had been there the night before as well.
Were you here earlier for the testimony of Alex Fuentes?
I was.
Are you aware that he testified that you sent texts to him?
I am.
Your Honor, I would like permission for both the jury and the witness to direct their attention to Exhibit 14.
Okay. Any objection?
No objection, Your Honor.
Okay.
Thank
Exhibit
you.
14.
Yes, 14. Thank you. Ms. Becker, do you have Exhibit 14 in front of you?
I do.
And did you send those texts?
Absolutely not.
And on the day of March 6th, did you go near Mr. Brackman's house?
I didn't know where he lived.
Did you plan to break into Mr. Brackman's house?
No.
Did you break into Mr. Brackman's house?
No.
Did you plan to vandalize Mr. Brackman's house?
No.
Did you vandalize Mr. Brackman's house?
No.
And Miss Avery Becker, did you kill Mr. Brackman?
No.
No further questions, Your Honor.
Cross-examination.
Yes, Your Honor. Good afternoon, Ms. Becker. So during your time in mock trial, you didn't get along with Coach Brackman.
No, I did not.
Brackman said you didn't put in the work.
He did.
And you felt that Brackman never really gave you any credit for anything you did.
Yes.
You felt that Brackman hated you.
Well, yes.
You argued at almost every practice last year.
Yes.
He called you lazy.
Yes.
And you told him he wouldn't know a good cross if it hit him over the head.
I did.
And about a month before regionals, Brackman removed you from the A team and sent you to the B team.
Yes.
And you were upset.
I was.
You believed that the B team was full of losers?
Yes.
Let's discuss your relationship with the other students in the A team in mock trial. So you and Taylor Perkins were friends.
Yes.
And you joined mock trial to hang out with Taylor and play on your phones.
Yes.
And Taylor Perkins quit the A team in order to help you restore your position when Brackman demoted you before regionals.
She did.
So your team did well at regionals.
Yes.
And you took pride in the awards you had won.
I did.
At practice after the regional competition, Brackman argued with you in front of the team.
Yes.
He said that you didn't deserve the Best Attorney Award.
Yes.
Brackman said your closing statement was just lucky.
Yes.
He told you would cause the whole team to look bad and lose its state if you didn't put in a lot more work.
He did.
So you called him the worst coach in the state.
I did.
You were angry.
Yes.
And you stormed out of practice.
Yes.
Okay, let's move forward a little bit to the day Brackman was murdered, March 6, 2020. You claim that you noticed that your phone was missing on the morning of March 6th after waking up.
I did notice that my phone was missing.
And you claim that you skipped school with Taylor to search for your phone.
I did.
Ms. Becker, you liked using your phone.
Yes.
You, in fact, initially joined mock trial to use your phone with Taylor Perkins.
Yes.
You didn't notice that your phone was missing for over 12 hours.
Yes.
You never made an effort to digitally locate your phone using iCloud.
No.
In fact, the only way you tried to locate your phone was to look all over at the Fry Shack and the mall, and to have Taylor call you.
Yes.
And the only person who claims to have seen you at the time Brackman was murdered is your friend, Taylor Perkins.
Yes.
Thank you, Ms. Brackman. Let's move back to the day that you had your argument with Mr. Brackman. So when Brackman kicked you off the team, you noticed his obnoxious white Porsche in the parking lot.
I did.
You wrote Worst Attorney Award on the hood of his Porsche.
Yes.
You at the time thought this would show Brackman what you really thought.
Yes.
You never checked to see if the marker you were using was permanent.
No.
You knew he loved his car.
Yes.
Brackman yelled at you when he noticed his car.
Yes.
He said he'd had enough of your crap.
Yes.
He said you screw around in practice and are disruptive.
Yes.
And then he kicked you off the team.
He did.
He told you you could, quote, join that loser, Taylor Perkins, and play video games all the time.
He did.
Which made you even madder.
Yes.
And after you went home, you told your mother that he had kicked you off the team for no good reason.
Yes.
And you told her that you would get back at him if it was the last thing you did.
Yes, I did. I was
Thank
very
you,
angry.
Ms. Becker. No further questions, Your Honor.
Thank you. Redirect?
Briefly, Your Honor. Miss Avery Becker, did you apologize to Mr. Brackman after riding on his car?
I did.
And did you know that you were riding on his car with a permanent marker?
No.
No further questions, Your Honor.
Thank you very much. Defense, you may call your next witness.
The defense would like to call Taylor Perkins to the stand.
Taylor Perkins. There you are. Very good. You may inquire.
Please state your name and spell your last name for the court record.
Taylor Perkins, Perkins.
Are you in school, Miss Perkins?
Yes, I'm currently enrolled at CU Boulder as a freshman.
And where did you go to school before this?
I attended Colorado High School.
Do you know Avery Becker, Miss Perkins?
Yeah, she was my best friend throughout high school.
Could you describe your relationship with Miss Becker to the jury?
Yeah, we were really good friends. We went to school together. We hung out a lot. And of course, we did mock trial together.
While you were in mock trial with Avery, did you see how Miss Becker interacted with the coach, Mr. Brackman?
Yeah, I did.
Could you describe their interactions with each other?
Yeah, I suppose the word I would use is aggressive. They seem to always be fighting and disagreeing on everything.
Miss Perkins, were you there when Miss Becker was kicked off of the mock trial team for good?
Yeah, well, no, I had quit earlier that year, but Miss Becker told me all about it.
Could you describe what happened for the jury?
Yeah, Avery Becker told me that she had gone to practice after the regional tournament where she did fabulously, by the way. She earned 2 awards. And Mr. Brackman started an argument with her. He kept saying how she didn't deserve her awards and being really mean in general. Avery got really upset and stormed out of the room. She grabbed a marker on the way out and, in a fit of rage when she got outside, drew on the hood of Mr. Brackman's Porsche, writing "Worst Attorney Award." After that, Mr. Brackman got really mad and kicked her off of the team.
Miss Perkins, were you told if Miss Becker tried to apologize to Mr. Brackman?
Yeah, I was actually there when she was asking the other mock trial students to help her apologize, and I heard that she went to see Mr. Brackman several times to apologize.
Was there anything else Miss Becker did to try and get back on the team?
Yeah, she texted all of the members of the mock trial team, asking them to go to Mr. Brackman on her behalf and ask him to let her back on the team, but he never did.
Miss Perkins, I wanted to ask you about some other members of the team. Were you familiar with Alex Cifuentes?
Yeah.
Did Miss Becker know Alex Cifuentes well?
I wouldn't say well. He was on the mock trial team with her, but they certainly weren't friends, and I don't think they got along very well, actually.
Did you and Miss Becker talk about whether Miss Becker asked Mr. Cifuentes for help getting back onto the team?
Yeah, she sent out texts to every member of the mock trial team, which included Alex Cifuentes.
And were you told if he did help her?
As far as I'm aware, he did not.
Did you see Miss Becker after her last attempt to apologize to Mr. Brackman?
Yeah, she came over to my house afterwards.
And where did you go after?
The 2 of us went to hang out at the mall and at the Fry Shack where mock trial kids often hang out.
Was there anyone else at the Fry Shack that you knew?
Yeah, mock trial practice had just gotten out, so a couple of the members were there, including Alex Fuentes, I think.
Did you talk to any of them?
Yeah, Alex Fuentes approached us, and I suppose you could say he expressed his regret that Avery Becker had been kicked off of the team, but he often when he says something,
Objection, Your Honor.
What's the basis of your objection?
Improper characterization under 403. This witness's statement's probative value is substantially outweighed by unfair prejudice and is misleading to the jury. It is also evidence of a person's character, which is not admissible to prove that in a particular occasion, a person acted in accordance with this character trait.
Okay. Response?
Your Honor, that was not what I was trying to get to. May I rephrase the question?
Yes, you may then. So I'll sustain the objection. You may rephrase the question.
Ms. Perkins, was there anyone specific that you spoke to at the Fry Shack?
Yes, Avery Becker and I spoke with Alex Fuentes.
And what happened at the end of the conversation with Alex Fuentes?
After talking to Alex Fuentes, Avery Becker was really upset and she went off to the bathroom. She left her phone on the table.
And after Miss Becker stormed to the bathroom?
The two of us left after she came back.
Could you and Miss Becker find the phone after leaving Fry Shack?
We couldn't, no. We figured out that it was missing the following morning, but because I had been texting her and she hadn't been responding.
How did you and Miss Becker look for the phone?
Yeah, we did. We skipped school and looked for it all day.
Miss Perkins, one more question. Do you know where Mr. Brackman lives?
No, I don't think so.
No further questions, Your Honor.
Thank you. Any recross?
Yes, Your Honor.
Very good. Or redirect, recross.
Ms. Perkins, the defendant is your best friend?
Yeah, she is.
You were on the same mock trial team?
Yeah, we were.
But you would not have done mock trial if Avery hadn't done it?
No, I mostly joined to hang out with her.
And in your opinion, Mr. Brackman didn't like Avery because she put in little effort?
Well, I think he disliked Avery for several reasons, though one of his excuses, I would say, is that she came.
So Mr. Brackman, in your opinion, didn't like Avery because she put in little effort?
If you will allow me to finish, I believe that Avery put in effort, though she did come to practice unprepared a couple of times, and Mr. Brackman used that as one of his excuses to dislike Avery.
Avery did not try hard enough.
As I said, on a couple of occasions she came unprepared, but I wouldn't say all of the time.
So, but often Avery did not try hard enough. Is that what you're saying?
Sometimes, not often.
And sometimes, or often, Avery did not come prepared.
Yes, sometimes.
And in your perception, that drove Mr. Brackman crazy.
Yes.
And sometimes Mr. Brackman would get so mad that you could swear that you could see steam coming out of his ears.
Yes, though I don't mean that literally, naturally.
And you found their feud kind of funny?
A little bit, though I think it ended really poorly.
But the feud bothered Avery.
Yeah.
Enough to play some pranks on the coach?
Yeah.
Avery could be rash?
Sometimes, though she certainly would never commit murder.
Avery could be rash?
Yes.
And had an inflated ego?
Sometimes, yes.
Moving on, let's talk about a practice about a month before the regional tournament. Avery came to practice the most unprepared that you had ever seen.
Yep.
And was very obviously making things up on the fly.
Yeah.
And in your perception, Mr. Brackman got heated.
Yes.
So heated that Avery was demoted down to the B team.
Yes.
And a week before regionals, you quit the team to support Avery.
I did, yes.
Moving on, you didn't see what happened at the practice where everything blew up?
No, Avery told me about it later.
And you only heard about it from Avery?
That's true, yes.
And apparently Coach Brackman was giving Avery a hard time?
Yes.
And Avery got upset?
Yes.
And on the way out, she saw Mr. Brackman's beloved Porsche?
Yes.
And wrote worst attorney on the hood of the car?
Worst attorney award, yes.
With permanent marker?
Yes.
And after this, Mr. Brackman kicked Avery off the team?
Yeah, he did.
Moving on the evening of March 5th, you and Avery went to the Fry Shack?
Yeah.
And then you both went and hung around the mall?
Yeah.
And it wasn't until the morning of March 6th, more than 12 hours later, until Avery realized that their phone was missing?
Yeah.
Despite the fact that Avery's phone, in your opinion, was like a third kidney.
Yeah.
And her phone was never out of reach.
Well, clearly not never, but often, but up until that point, yeah, never.
You said it was never out of reach.
Yes, up until that point, never.
When you realized the phone was missing, you ditched school on March 6th.
Yeah.
In hopes of retracing your steps?
Yeah.
You went to the mall?
Yeah.
And checked every store you'd gone to?
Yes, we did.
You even went back to the Fry Shack?
Yeah.
You texted and called the phone several times?
Yep.
You burned the entire day searching?
Yes.
Yet, in a matter of minutes, you could have used the iCloud website to find Avery's phone.
Yeah, I didn't remember it at the time, but I suppose yes.
And you never used the iCloud website to find Avery's phone?
No.
Thank you, Your Honor. No further questions.
Okay. Ms. Jensen.
Miss Perkins, did Miss Becker tell you that she tried to apologize for what she had done to Mr. Brackman's car?
Yes, she did.
Another question. Can you explain to the jury exactly why you quit the mock trial team?
Yeah, I mostly joined, as I said, to hang out with Avery, and because she wasn't on the team anymore, I decided to quit so that she would have a chance. She really deserved to be on the A team.
And Miss Perkins, when exactly did you and Miss Becker realize Miss Becker's phone was missing?
The following morning, the morning of March 6th.
Can you explain to the jury why you didn't use the iCloud service to find it?
I didn't remember that we could at the time.
No further questions, Your Honor.
Thank you. Any final recross?
No, Your Honor.
Very good, thank you. And defense, you may call your next witness.
The defense calls Blake Van Owen to the stand.
Blake Van Owen, very good. You may proceed.
Please state your name and spell your last name for the record.
Blake Van Owen, Vanowen.
What is your job?
I own and operate my own private investigative service, lecture at CU Denver, and serve as an expert witness from time to time.
What drove you to work as a private investigator?
Well, I've always had a real passion for justice. I've tried to pursue it however I can throughout my professional life. Initially, I worked with the police.
And why don't you work with the police anymore?
Well, you see, there was this incident during which, using a officially sanctioned technique, I inadvertently injured a young woman of color. And that incident and the way it was handled just led me to be completely disillusioned with police work. I didn't feel like I was being able to fulfill my passions there, and so I left. I wanted to pursue justice, not whatever the police were doing.
You mentioned that you worked as a lecturer. How long have you worked as a lecturer?
About 5 years now.
And where did you go to school?
I got my master's in criminal justice from Ashford University's online program.
You also mentioned before that you regularly testify as an expert. How often have you testified as an expert?
About 25 times in total, 12 times as an expert in general police practices, 8 times in crime scene reconstruction, and 5 times in cell tower data analysis.
And can you explain for the jury what cell tower data analysis is?
Cell tower data analysis is utilizing cell records in order to assess where a phone was when someone tried to connect to it, who did, and at what time it happened.
Your Honor, I move to enter Professor Blake Van Owen as an expert in crime scene reconstruction, police investigation practices, and cell tower data analysis.
Crime scene reconstruction. What was it? List those again. You speak very quickly.
Sorry. Crime scene reconstruction, police investigation practices, and cell tower data analysis.
Okay. Any objection to this witness being qualified as an expert in crime scene reconstruction, police investigation techniques, and cell tower data analysis?
Yes, Your Honor. Permission to voir dire.
Granted.
Thank you, Your Honor. Professor Van Owen, you left the police department after an incident in which you injured a young woman during an arrest, correct?
Objection outside the scope of voir dire.
Response?
Your Honor, I'm simply establishing the work experience of the witness with this question.
Okay, well, that question wasn't about work experience. So I'm going to sustain the objection. Go ahead and ask another question. I think the question that you're going to ask is more about credibility and not about his scientific, technical, or other specialized knowledge.
Okay, thank you, Your Honor. I will move on to a different question. Since leaving the police department, you have not worked as a police officer.
No, I have not.
You have not been exposed to police protocol nor training since then.
Well, I have further studied criminal justice, which I think tends to overlap rather dramatically.
But not specifically police training or protocol.
Not in a formalized sense, but in the course of my work as a private investigator, I have utilized my skills.
All right. You have not received any specializations outside of your master's degree in criminal justice.
No, I have a bachelor's degree in English.
You do not have any formal education in crime scene reconstruction.
No, not beyond my experience with the police department and further utilization of that experience.
So you haven't sat in a classroom and learned about crime scene reconstruction?
No.
Do you have any formal education surrounding cell tower data analysis?
No, that was something I learned as a part of my training as a police officer.
All right. And cell tower data analysis is not a part of the curriculum you teach, is that correct?
No, it rarely comes up there.
And crime scene reconstruction is also not part of the curriculum you teach, is that correct?
Well, I teach criminal justice, so to the extent that the two overlap, yes, and where it doesn't, no.
All right, Your Honor, I do object to Professor Van Owen being admitted as an expert witness in crime scene reconstruction and cell tower data analysis, as she lacks the specific formal education in both of these fields.
Response?
Formal education is not necessarily required for expertise. She has been recognized as an expert multiple times in these fields, and thus I believe she has the proper experience to be recognized as an expert.
Very good. I do agree. Formal education is not a required. What is required is some type of knowledge, skill, experience, training, or education. So the court will overrule the objection and qualify this witness as a crime scene reconstructionist, cell tower data analyst, and police investigation and expertise in police investigation techniques.
Permission to proceed.
Yeah, you may proceed. Thank you.
How are you involved in this case?
I was hired by the defense in order to look over the police work.
And are you paid to be here today?
I am, yes.
Can you explain what your billing rates are?
I charge $225 an hour for general investigative work and research, and then a further $450 an hour for any writing or court appearances.
Can you explain what you reviewed as a part of your investigation?
Yes, I reviewed Jordan Markowitz's police report, Kyle Kuzak's crime scene reconstruction, and I also performed a partial investigation of my own.
Do you disagree with Kyle Kuzak's crime scene reconstruction?
I do. There are a number of conclusions that he comes to that I believe are based almost entirely on assumptions.
What in particular do you disagree with?
Well, I disagree with the significance which he attributes to the scuff marks, among other things, as well as his assessment that a struggle clearly occurred between the assailant and the victim from a standing position.
Can you explain why you disagree with how Kyle Kuzak uses the scuff marks?
Yes. Given the fact that they quite plainly cannot be specifically dated to any particular time, I think that assuming that they were part of the incident of March 6th is, well, just that, an assumption, not based in fact.
And can you explain why you disagree with Kyle Kuzak's conclusion about the struggle?
Yes, Kyle Kuzak suggests that the victim was stabbed from a standing position while the victim was also standing. However, given the significant difference in the height and given that there was no real difference between the height and build of the assailant and Mr. Brackman, it would be very difficult to stab downward as Mr. Kuzak suggested. However, if Mr. Brackman had been sitting, the stab wound could have much more easily occurred.
Thank you. I'd like to move on to the police reports and their collection of evidence. Do you disagree with how Jordan Markowitz collected the evidence?
Yes, I don't think that Detective Markowitz went far enough in any of the avenues which he pursued. I think that Detective Markowitz ought to have downloaded the contents of the cell phones of everyone involved rather than just Mr. Brackman's passwords and Avery Becker's call detail records. They have the technology to do that, the Celebrite system.
And can you explain how this information could have been helpful?
For instance, if Detective Markowitz had downloaded the contents of Taylor Perkins' cell phone, which, again, would have been completely feasible, he could have verified Avery Becker's alibi that Taylor Perkins and Avery Becker had been texting, calling Ms. Becker's phone for the entire afternoon. The contents of those messages would have been far different if they'd been separate from each other, and so it would have almost completely exonerated Ms. Becker. And there's Alex Cifuentes' phone. It just would have gone a long way to ascertaining the veracity of Ms. Cifuentes' claims that the text messages were genuine. I'm not necessarily saying that they weren't, but it would have just gone a long way to prove that they were, and so we just have so little certainty in this case.
I'd like to move on to the cell tower data. Have you reviewed the call detail records Jordan Markowitz obtained?
I have, yes.
And are call detail records a reliable way of tracking a cell phone?
Not unless you consider a 6-mile radius reliable. No, they don't pinpoint the exact location of a phone. It's fairly vague, honestly.
And can you explain why they don't?
Well, you see, the algorithm which pairs a cell phone to a cell tower does so based on availability rather than necessarily proximity. Usually, proximity is a major contributing factor, but the fact is that that's not always the case, and so given the lack of certainty, call detail records become equally shaky and uncertain.
And do you think Jordan Markowitz thoroughly collected data from the cell towers?
Gracious, no. I think that Jordan Markowitz ought to have scanned the area. Honestly, if Detective Markowitz had been genuinely interested in being comprehensive here, he would have gone a lot more in depth.
And can you explain how he could have gone more in depth?
Well, Detective Markowitz could have gotten the call detail records or just general cell tower data from a lot of the other phones in the area. He focused on one phone at one particular very small interval of time rather than getting a better, more comprehensive view of what was going on in the past few days.
And do you disagree with how Jordan Markowitz managed any of the evidence?
Yes, the corrupted photographs of blood spatter, which the police department lost. Now, again, I'm not suggesting any kind of deliberate action here, but these things happen, and so it's important to be prepared for it and, like, have additional copies of such photographs. And so the fact that they didn't prepare for every eventuality like that, it's just sloppy.
And what is your overall conclusion about the police investigation and crime scene reconstruction?
I think they picked an easy answer and just ran with it. There was so much room for confirmation bias that it's tunnel vision.
Thank you, Your Honor. No further questions.
Thank you. Cross-examination?
Yes, Your Honor. Professor Van Owen, in more than 100 cases, you've always worked for the defense, correct?
Well, the police department has their own people to call in, so there's not really much call for independent consultants. But yes.
And you have always testified for the defense?
Yes.
As a private investigator, you were hired by the defendant in this case.
Yes, I was.
And you made $225 per hour for your research on this case.
Yes, with an additional $450 per hour for court appearances and deposition.
And you also made $225 per hour for your investigation work.
Yes.
To date, you have made approximately $7,000 in total for this case. Is that correct?
Yes.
And as you mentioned, you expect to be paid an extra $450 per hour to testify today.
Yes.
So in total, you expect to earn approximately $8,000 for your work in this case.
Can't rush quality.
That's quite the payday. Moving on, I'd like to ask a few questions about your investigative work.
Of course.
You never visited the crime scene for this case.
No, I was not given the opportunity to do so.
You simply reviewed the police reports.
Yes.
You simply reviewed Mr. Kuzak's reconstruction report.
I did.
You simply reviewed Detective Markowitz's report.
I did.
You admit that holding a knife the way you suggest the assailant did in your report is uncommon.
Yes.
You did not obtain the cell tower records for the day prior to the murder to corroborate the defendant's alibi.
No. I don't have access to that information.
And you made $8,000 for this work.
Yes.
Thank you, Your Honor, and thank you, Professor Van Owen. I have no further questions.
Very good. Any redirect?
Briefly, Your Honor.
You may proceed.
Why do you only testify for the defense?
The police department has their own people. Why would you pay for a consultant when you have everyone you need in-house? There's just not much call for consultants.
Thank you, Your Honor. No further questions.
Okay. Okay. Very good. Defense, any further additional witnesses or testimony?
No, Your Honor, the defense rests.
Okay, are we ready to proceed to closing arguments?
The prosecution is, Your Honor.
Defense?
Yes, Your Honor.
Very good. Prosecution, you may proceed.
Your Honor, before I begin, I'd like to reserve all remaining time for rebuttal.
Okay. Any objection?
No objection, Your Honor.
Okay. Any time remaining can be reserved for rebuttal.
Thank you. I'll get back at him if it's the last thing I do, were the words of the defendant in this case mere days before brutally murdering Mackenzie Brackman in his home. Members of the jury, you are here today to answer a simple question. Who killed Mr. Mackenzie Brackman on March 6, 2020? In this case, the defendant had a motive and an intent to hurt Mr. Mackenzie Brackman, along with a demonstrated history of impulsivity and vengeful, rash behaviors. During their time in mock trial, there were constant arguments between the defendant and the victim at practices for mock trial. The defendant was constantly underprepared for practices, relying on their good looks and improvisational skills to complete tasks on the team, leaving the members as well as the victim in a state of constant anxiety. Ultimately, the victim kicked the defendant off the mock trial team for their constant bad behavior and arrogance. As the defendant themselves testifies, they had an enormous argument with the victim after the regional competition, in which they called him the worst coach in the state. Immediately after this incident, the defendant wrote Worst Attorney Award across the hood of the victim's Porsche in permanent marker, leading to yet another massive argument. After this incident, the defendant told their mother they would get back at him if it was the last thing they did, texting Alex Cifuentes with their plan to trash the victim's house shortly after. The defendant denies having sent these text messages, despite the fact that Cifuentes provided screenshots to the investigators in this case, and has testified under oath to having personally received these messages from the defendant. The defendant clearly had a motive and an intent to commit the charge of second-degree burglary of the victim's dwelling prior to March 6th. The evidence of this intent continued on the day of the crime. The defense claims the defendant missed school to search for their cell phone. However, both Becker and Perkins have also testified that the defendant was extremely attached to their cell phone. Perkins even refers to the cell phone as Becker's third kidney. It is basically impossible that the defendant would have lost their phone in the early evening of March 5th and failed to notice until they woke up on March 6th, almost 12 hours later. This is one of the many discrepancies in the defense's theory of the case. Additionally, Detective Jordan Markowitz has testified that the defendant's call detail records are consistent with a route connecting fully to 3 towers in a row that would lead them directly from their dwelling to the victim's dwelling. Members of the jury, that means that according to their own phone, shortly before Mr. Brackman's death, Avery Becker was en route to his house. Attendance records at CHS also show that Avery Becker was absent from school on March 6th. And the only person who claims to have seen the defendant at the time the victim was killed is their friend, Taylor Perkins. As you've heard today, Kyle Cusack, a crime scene reconstruction expert, has shown that Mackenzie Brackman's death is consistent with a murder committed in the furtherance of the crime of second-degree burglary of a dwelling, qualifying it as a voluntary instance of felony murder. In this case, the prosecution must prove beyond a reasonable doubt that the defendant, Avery Becker, committed the charge of second-degree burglary and felony murder. The testimony you've heard today provides ample evidence to show that the defendant had a motive, a history of rash behaviors, and a demonstrated intent to commit the crime in question. The defense has tried to raise the specter of an alternate suspect named Blair Rollins in this case, but their entire theory is based on speculation, since their hired gun, Blake Van Owen, chose not to pursue any real evidence related to this suspect, and instead chose to focus on baselessly discrediting an oversimplified version of Mr. Cusack's work. Their theory comes down to speculative claims of cloaks and daggers, while there is concrete evidence for convicting Avery Becker. we're left with the simple question of who killed Mackenzie Brackman, and it is unclear who could have killed him besides Avery Becker, his longtime rival who promised to get back at him if it was the last thing they did. Members of the jury, the evidence is proof enough to convict the defendant of the charges against them. Vote in favor of convicting Avery Becker. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Defense?
Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, Avery Becker is not guilty of murder. She is not guilty of second-degree burglary. She is not guilty of criminal mischief. The prosecution had the burden of proof. The prosecution needed to prove to you, beyond a shadow of a reasonable doubt, that Avery Becker committed all three of the previously stated crimes. They have failed to do this. The prosecution's facts do not add up because they took the easy way out. Jury Instruction 7 states that in order for you to find Avery Becker guilty of murder in the first degree or felony murder, she must have gotten someone killed while in the midst of committing second-degree burglary. Jury Instruction 8 states that in order for you to find Avery Becker guilty of second-degree burglary, she must have unlawfully entered or remained unlawfully in a dwelling with the intent to commit criminal mischief. Jury Instruction 9 states that in order for you to find Avery Becker guilty of criminal mischief, she must have knowingly damaged another person's property. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, the prosecution has failed to prove any of these things. Their evidence and their arguments are flawed. Their own witnesses have provided reasonable doubt to their case. Recall Detective Markowitz's testimony. She admitted that she failed to interview any partners, witnesses, or former clients of Mr. Brackman's. Admitted that her team failed and lost evidence. Admitted that she did not remember everything she had seen in that evidence quite correctly. She was unsure of her case. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, that is reasonable doubt. Detective Markowitz also based her expert opinion on the fact that Avery Becker's phone connected to a tower near Mr. Brackman's house when she failed to prove in the first place that Avery Becker had her phone with her. That is reasonable doubt. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, recall Kyle Cusack's testimony. Kyle Cusack insisted that there was a scuffle because of scuff marks on the ground, which he failed to have analyzed, a broken plate, and an open knife drawer, and a knife block with the knife missing. Ladies and gentlemen, how do we know when those scuff marks were made? How do we know when that plate was broken? How do we know that the knife that was used to stab Mr. Brackman came from the knife block or the knife drawer? They based their case on guesswork. They took the easy way out. Blake Van Owen testified that Kyle Cusack provided no backing for the crime scene reconstruction. They also told us that Detective Markowitz's phone records, which she used to place my client at the crime scene, were not accurate. A phone 6 miles away from Mr. Brackman's house could have connected to a tower near it. That is reasonable doubt. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, Avery Becker testified that she does not know where Mr. Brackman lives. She might have been devastated after being kicked off of the mock trial team, but she could not go to vandalize Mr. Brackman's house. After Avery Becker had apologized multiple times to no avail, after she had tried endlessly to get back on the mock trial team, she realized because of a mistake she was not getting back on, and so she let it go. She surrendered. Taylor Perkins testified that she was with Ms. Becker on March 5th, 2020 and March 6th, 2020. They went to the fry shop together on March 5th, 2020, the day before Mr. Brackman was murdered. After an uncomfortable conversation with Alex Cifuentes, Avery Becker and Ms. Perkins left together. The next day, March 6th, 2020, the day that Mr. Brackman was murdered, Avery Becker could not find her phone. Taylor Perkins and Avery Becker looked all day for the missing phone. Where was the phone, ladies and gentlemen of the jury? Where was the phone that Detective Markowitz used to place my client at the crime scene? The prosecution, yet again, took the easy way out. Alex Cifuentes told us that they were in possession of the phone at one point the night before. They did not say they gave it back. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, Avery Becker is not guilty of murder, second-degree burglary, or criminal mischief. Avery Becker has done nothing wrong, and you must find her not guilty.
Thank you. Ms. Faulkner, I think you might have less than a minute, but You may
Yes.
rebut.
Thank you, Your Honor. Members of the jury, follow the evidence, follow the conflict, follow the defendant's own words of intent. The flaws of the defense's case are abundantly clear. Vote to convict Avery Becker. Thank you.
Well, everyone's turned their sound off and their video off. Well done, everybody. Well done. Can anybody join the conference so we can have a chat? Anyone? Oh, hello. Oh, it's so nice to see faces. Well done. Let me make some just brief little comments, and I'm going to turn it over to the scoring panelists because they've got work to do. First, I want to say I cannot believe that the energy level that you were able to produce when I know you're all sitting by yourself. That was amazing. It's really hard. You know, when we're in the courtroom all together, that energy feeds off itself, and it's hard to kind of duplicate that when you're sitting all alone. So well done. Well done being able to tell stories and keep us engaged in this when I know that you're sitting by yourself. So I was very, very impressed with that. Very impressed with all your very good eye contact. That's hard to do because I know what you're looking at. You're looking at a little camera. And that's not very engaging to look at, so that was well done. I will tell you that I have conducted several hearings. Oh, by the way, my name is Magistrate Christy Jansen. I am a district court magistrate for the 8th Judicial District here in Larimer County. I did title myself judge because that's the role that I was playing for your mock court. But I do conduct hearings, and I do a lot of them via WebEx. Oddly enough, today was smoother than a lot of the hearings that I've had. So well done for your preparation, and that was really, really good. A couple little comments that I wanted to make. Oh gosh, I've got notes on everybody. Good eye contact, good clear communication. I like the story and of the prosecution following the evidence and then following up that with at the end. I like how you tied that together. I like that the prosecution told a wonderful story and kept you engaged and you're emotionally involved in the case. And Miss Jensen, I love that you brought everyone back and said, no, we've got work to do. Don't just follow this story. You've got work to do, jury. You've got reasonable doubt, and here's the evidence, and here's the poke in the holes. That was a good juxtaposition and a good way for both of you to present your case in a manner that's very compelling. Well done. I love the arguments about the 404 character evidence. The first time the prosecution tried it, the defense says, no, I'm not offering it for that reason. And that was perfect because that was very persuasive. The second time it was brought, Ms. Jensen, again, you had a really good argument about how it was used, but you withdrew your question. You said you'll change your question. Don't do that. You don't have to do that. You were on the right track. You said, well, that's not how I was about to use it, but I'll change my question. Like, oh, no, you had it. So that was great. I love that. Who was it? Let's see. Ms. Faulkner again. I love how you challenged. No, Ms. Faulkner, I liked how you used Rule 702 when qualifying the witness. That was really nice because of all these things qualify the witness. I also was very impressed. Let's see, who challenged? It was Ms. Jupiter. I love how you challenged the expertise, even though I overruled your objection. You had me on my toes with my rule book out. I'm taking notes. That was well done. And Mr. Chang, you came to the same conclusion that I did, but I had to listen really close and we had to be on our toes. So that was really, really good. I've got notes on everybody. I just was really impressed with that you're able to do this with this forum and still have, like I said, the same level of energy and compelling that you're just drawn in to your story. So thank you so much. So that's enough hearing from me. Let's hear from the scoring panelist. Who wants to go first?
Hi, so my name is Samantha. I'm a family law attorney here in Fort Collins. often practice in front of Judge Christiansen. I was also very impressed with everyone. You guys definitely held my attention throughout the entire proceedings, and I think that's difficult to do, not only just kind of with jurors in general, but especially via WebEx. And so I thought everyone did a very good job. I really enjoyed the challenging of the experts and drawing out the financial pieces of the experts and really distinguishing between the two experts. And I thought that was super helpful for your case on each side. And so that was really interesting. And I think you guys did a great job at that, especially with the voir dire. I think that's a great use. I don't think attorneys do it often enough. And so that was very cool to see. I think you guys had great control over the objections and you guys were prepared for responding to the objections. I think a lot of attorneys in court often don't sort of have that automatic answer, and you guys all did. So that was great. That was very impressive. And I really enjoyed on cross-examination, and this is across the board for everyone, that you guys did one fact per question. That's super helpful. That's how cross-examination should be. And I think you guys all did a very good job with that. Congratulations.
I'll go. And I'm Diane Peterson, and I know we didn't get to introduce ourselves in our last session. So I'm an attorney in Larimer County, mostly in Loveland, been practicing 30 years and mostly doing child advocacy, juvenile law, child protection type stuff, guardian ad litem and that kind of thing. I also need to apologize for Minecraft. I actually lied to you when I gave comments the first time and I said I'd been judging mock trial for 10 years. I had a total brain flip because I actually looked back and thought about my first time of judging, and it was actually 22 years ago. And I've done it every year except last year for 22 years. And that being said, like everyone else, I was really, really impressed how everybody used this forum and was able to make it the same experience almost that I've had for 22 years, even though we weren't all in the courtroom. I think both teams were very professional. There wasn't any arguing back and forth. You guys made your point. You waited for the judge to rule on objections and things, and then you simply moved on. And I thought that is really good. It kept the pace going. Everybody was really good at direct examination and having a plan and walking your witness through step by step. Cross-examination is a lot harder, and people had a little more difficulty with that. One of the things that sort of got to me, and this is being really, really picky, so keep that in mind. Don't, this is really picky, but most people tended to not ask a question on cross, but you made a statement. So for example, you are the best friend of Alex Beckers. Instead of saying something like, isn't it fair to say that you're Alex Becker's very best friend? Or aren't you best friend? Make it a question, because once or twice just making a statement isn't annoying, but what I found was when you did it that way consistently in real life, and I think the magistrate can back me up, in real life, opposing counsel would be jumping on that and saying, Your Honor, objection, testifying. They're not asking a question that the witness can answer. And then when they keep objecting, then it really stalls your case. So just be kind of mindful. Try to think about your wording a little bit. Make it A, be a question, B, have a little bit bigger impact. And both sides did that equally. And I don't know how long all of you have been doing mock trials. So if this is, only your first or second year, again, I'm being really picky. And on cross, don't keep asking the same question over and over again, waiting for the witness to give you the answer that you want. If they don't do it the first or the second time, they're not going to give it to you. And if you keep asking the same question over and over, then you, the question person, starts looking disagreeable or unlikable. And if you've got a judge, they can get past that. But if you're playing to a jury, which you likely would be in a criminal trial, you could damage your case just by appearing unlikable. Team Pac-Man, I would like to have seen you step up your objection game a little bit. You tended not to do it. There's a fine line. You don't want to object too much because, again, then you look disagreeable or unlikable. But you guys really didn't object too much. And so Team Minecraft got away with a lot of information that otherwise could have been cut short. So think about it. Sometimes objection is a strategy that counsel will use. And then just to wrap up, like the other two who have commented, defense, Team Pac-Man, you did a really good job at pulling out alternative answers, building that beyond a reasonable doubt for the jury, and particularly in the closing argument for Pac-Man in bringing out to the jury first. Here's what you gotta listen for, and here's what you've gotta find. 3 crimes, here's the elements of those. But guess what? You didn't hear it, and here's what was sorely lacking. So that was a really good closing argument.
Well, I'm Frank Haug, and I'm an attorney here in Fort Collins, and I was a prosecutor for about 5 years, and then since then I've worked in local government. As like always, I'm always so impressed with how well you guys do. I've been doing this now, I think about 10 years I've been doing mock trial all around the state. I started doing it in Grand Junction, and then I've done it in Adams County, and I've done it up here now. Did a great job. I thought the closings were really strong. Sadie, you did a great job. Juliet, you did a great job. Very passionate, I really liked, Juliet, how you went through the jury instructions. I thought that was really, really helpful. When I was a prosecutor, I was always really careful to explain the instructions and make sure everybody understood what was going on. So I thought that was really good. You guys do great. Keep it up. You have such a great opportunity here to learn different skills, and I think that's really great. And one of the fun things too about the law is just you get to learn about so many different things. In this case, you're talking about cell phone triangulation and blood splatters and all these different things. And so you really get exposed to such a broad range of information, which is one of the things I think is the most fun about it. So good job. Keep it up. You guys are doing great.
I don't know if the court has any more for you guys or any of the scorers, but I did want to do 2 quick reminders. One for the scorers, if you haven't hit submit on your score sheet, please do. I think we may have received 2 or 3 of them already. And then for all the students, tomorrow, there was a question about the competition schedule. And some people had difficulty seeing what courtroom and what their opponent was for the second round. When you're in the platform, you have to exit the platform and log back in for the changes to show. So just pass along to the coach that when they're staring at it and trying to figure out where you guys are for the next round, you have to log out and log back in, and it'll update for it. So we will finish everything tonight, and then we'll update the competition schedule, and it'll be available for you tomorrow morning.